Welcome, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I'm so glad that you are joining us today. And as you are tuning in, if you will drop me a note in the comments where you're tuning in from, I'd love to see where you're coming in to us from. Looks like we are connected now on Facebook and on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. So, glad to have everyone as you're joining in. And if you're catching us on the replay, make sure you use hashtag replay so we'll know that. And if you have questions along the way, you can definitely pop them in the comments and we will try to catch those and address any questions. We've got an exciting topic today and I'm really excited to get to that. But before we do, let me do one more housekeeping item. If you are joining from Facebook, make sure that you give Facebook and StreamYard permission to speak to each other. You can do that. I've got a just down on the banner right below. It's go to StreamYard.com/Facebook and you can connect your devices there. And if you've already connected, you don't need to do that again on that device. So all that's doing is when you leave a comment, it keeps me from just seeing Facebook user and I can see your name. So happy to have you do that. And then just if I am new to you and you are new to me, let's have some introductions. My name is Beverly Smith. I'm the founder of Career Success Strategies. I'm also the former owner of a staffing and recruiting firm. So I know firsthand what hiring managers are looking for, and I use that knowledge to help mid, senior, and executive level professionals build their resumes, help them with their LinkedIn branding, help them with their job search strategies, all that so that they can land the career of their dreams. So last week we had a great topic. We talked a little bit about how to develop a resume that reduces the risk of age bias. Really important episode. If you missed it, you can go back to my YouTube channel and let me see if I can get that on here. It's at Beverly Smith Resumes and you can catch the replay there. And you'll need to go to the live tab though, because all of my videos are recorded live. So you just click on the live tab and you can catch the replay from anything there. And again, if you have comments along the way, what I ask you to do is use hashtag replay. And also if you will tag me, that way I get a notification that you've commented so I can come back. So this week, I am so excited. My friend Amy Langston is returning to the show, and we are going to be discussing a really important topic on service leadership and knowing the strengths as well as weaknesses and areas that we can improve to help our teams grow and develop. So let me tell you a little bit about Amy. Amy Langston is a distinguished business consultant and service leadership advocate with over 15 years of expertise in recruiting, operations, as well as sales leadership. As a former director in the professional industries of recruiting, as well as managed services, IT services, Amy is dedicated to aligning top talent with the company's vision and ensuring the team harmony to achieve exceptional client results. Her commitment to quality, consistency, and accountability has driven success in high-volume recruitment projects across Arkansas and beyond. Amy's extensive experience includes overseeing diverse recruitment initiatives and training programs, contributing to competitive internships, as well as certified apprenticeships offerings. Amy holds a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology and computer science from the University of Arkansas at Monticello, and she's also a certified facilitator of the 5 behaviors of a dysfunctional team. Outside of her professional endeavors, Amy is passionate about mentoring emerging leaders and actively participates in community development programs. Her commitment to continuous learning and innovation makes her a sought-after speaker as well as consultant. Amy, I'm so glad you're back.
Me too. Thank you. That was a long a long intro and all the things, and it's always exciting to come back and as former recruiters to get together and chat about what we learned along the way, right?
Yes, yes, and that's what I love. I loved our last conversation, and we talked a lot, I believe, about how to get seen by a recruiter and things that you can do to make sure that you get noticed and things like that. And it was a great
Mm,
episode. I'm trying to remember. I think that was last fall. So, y'all, that's
yeah,
in the replays. Make sure you check it out. It was really informative. So,
yes,
but
really good.
I am so excited about this topic. We've had some really positive feedback when we put it out to the world that this is what we're going to be talking about. So I think if it's good with you, let's just go ahead and dive in.
Yeah, let's go.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about what service leadership really is and how does it differ from, let's say, traditional leadership models.
Sure. So I think my favorite way to answer that is most of us can recognize very quickly and easily when you're not in a service leadership uh, role or environment because my favorite, I guess, coin term that I like to use, and I took this from, I think, Patrick Lencioni's books, is that there's a false harmony. So you see quiet meetings, you see there's not much chatter. Everyone is in agreement. Typically, you've got a new rollout deployment of something, and everybody is just crickets. There's no banter. There's no discussion. It's just like everybody nods their head and moves on, and that is super toxic. That is like red flag alert. Send the cavalry because we have a problem. Service leadership really is a philosophy that prioritizes serving others and emphasizing the leader's role in supporting and empowering their team. So traditional leadership is usually going to focus on authority and control. Who are you leading? Who are you managing? It's often where we, hear the words micromanaged and those kind of things with that. But service leadership is really more about humility, empathy, and collaboration,
Mhm.
and avoiding that false harmony environment.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha. A lot of team development, really, it sounds like.
Yes. So that's
Mhm,
probably why I love this style the most. Um,
mhm,
over my years in recruiting, having a team and when you're in recruiting and staffing, I think, when you're in it, this. When you're on the outside and you don't really know what recruiters do or what it's like to live in that world, frankly, any service, MSPs, the same way.
mhm,
When the work that they're doing is responsive, so it's
right.
difficult in some ways to be proactive. But if you can find a way to be proactive, it actually eliminates a lot of headache in the
Mhm,
work environment. And
sure.
so what I often saw was training is a great way through, it encourages collaboration and even humility when you have different levels of people training you on certain topics. Really lean into those things. So
Mhm.
training definitely becomes a part of service leadership.
Yeah, yeah, I know for me, like, hindsight is 2020. There are so many things that I would do differently in those areas because it is so reactive. I think we did some positive things as far as, like, trying to niche our business so that we're always recruiting for similar type roles, and we're not trying to staff for everybody in town and just really kinda staying in your lane. That was something that was really helpful, but it's also, I mean, it's such a stressful environment, and you've got, clients that are needing to get these positions filled. And understandably, if they do not have these openings filled, then they're in a backlog. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, it can be very, very reactive. And I always said, you can't, you have service. That's what we had to sell, and you really can't. Um, ensure completely that the people that you send are going to do exactly what they're supposed to do. It's kind of a guessing game there.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge component within the services industry, and why
mhm,
service leadership is such a great format to follow, because when you're in the service industry, your product is typically the skill or knowledge of a human,
mhm,
and it's often not something, it is something that the technical task of it can be replicated or automated, but there is a human aspect that we really cannot automate, or just completely wipe out the human
yeah,
component in services industry, service
right.
offerings. And I think, it's really interesting, since COVID, the word that we do not speak of. But I was in another training last week, and I said, a former distraction, insert, if it's not COVID, just insert the distraction. Something else will happen or come up.
Yeah.
Um, and, the thing that I think, learned really from that, and are still learning, is the impact that the shift of going to more hybrid or remote work environments has
Mhm.
had on the world. And it's really changed. And service leadership, I think, is in desperate need across the world. Frankly, I don't think it's just a US thing, but I think it's across the world, because
Mhm.
people are starving for more of a human aspect of the role. We learned during COVID that we do need some human
Mhm.
interaction. Uh, we need the opportunity to talk about life and things, and how that impacts
Right.
our day.
Right, right. I mean, we spend so much of our day at work, and so having those connections and those relationships, and being able to have a conversation with people, just about life, the water cooler moments and things like that are no longer exist. They have to be virtual water coolers. So
Really.
yeah.
It's funny. On that note, something that I noticed, I don't know how many people that are listening today or watching have ever had a chance to travel internationally. And if you've had the chance to travel internationally, maybe on a mission trip, or a vacation or somewhere, if you've by chance gone to an area that doesn't necessarily have all the modern amenities that you might find in the comfort of your area, your home, then you might not see these types of things. But I had a really beautiful opportunity to travel to the Philippines earlier this year, and it was mind blowing watching what happens, service leadership and the teamwork involvement that happens in what many of us might consider like a third world country, or
Mhm.
a place that doesn't have those modern amenities. Going into that, and observation of the family environment and the working environment. At first glance, I thought, wow, man, they, very likely home with dirt floors, and all these
Mhm.
different things. But as you start, really watching, I had 17 days there. And what I learned, what I left with was, whoa, like, we are getting it so wrong in so many ways when you talk
Yeah.
about teamwork and service leadership, because the the driving factor that I find in service leadership is that it doesn't require that every single person knows everything there is to know. It requires that we have a really well developed and balanced team who can collaborate and communicate with each other. And what I started to observe in these home and family communities in the Philippines, and now I've, making it more of a point to recognize those things here in the U.S. But when you hear the saying, "It takes a village to raise kids," and those kind of things, I was like, it makes so much sense now, and I understand, because seeing that, there was maybe a person or two people, and they're the really good cooks. Like, they enjoy
Mhm.
it, love cooking, and they do it for the whole village or community, family unit.
Mhm.
And then there's another person who, perhaps they're a really good carpenter, and they build all of the structures, or they
Yeah.
repair the different structures. And it just really brought so much insight. Not only that, but also the focus of what they were working for wasn't to add and create something really fancy so that everybody from the exterior looks and walks by and goes, "Ooh, wow, your house is beautiful." That's what they need. But what really caught my attention was seeing how they work together as a team.
Mm.
And in the over 2 weeks that I was there, not one time did I hear an argument. I didn't hear anybody yelling. And I thought, man, if we could replicate that in the work environment, and really approach things with a service leadership mindset and collaborative efforts, how much we could get done.
Yeah.
That
I
it was
love that.
really stood out to me.
Oh, well, I love that too, because I think we all bring so many different strengths to the table. And it kind of always reminds me of that. Don't just get the right people on the bus, but get them in the right seats on the bus. And that's hard. That sounds so
Mhm.
great and wonderful, but when you're trying to build a team, sometimes you've got to work with what you've got, and it can be really frustrating when you've got a whole team that's just good at this, or getting someone to pipe up and say, "Hey, I'd be really good here," or even maybe they don't even have the self-awareness to know what their own strengths are. I did an episode, I think back in March or April, with Indy Little, and we talked about he's a core clarity expert in Clifton Strengths, and that going through that program with him has just hugely eye-opening for me. And I'm like, I wish I would have had my whole team go through something like that way back in the day. So yeah,
Yes.
I wish I would pop in real quick and say, Talina McDaniel says hi, Amy. So you got
Hi, Selena.
someone watching.
Yes.
That kind of leads me talking about skills into our next question. What are the key traits and skills that really define a successful service leader in your eyes, Amy?
Sure. So I feel like someone who is aware. So big traits that I like to see in a service leader is someone who's empathetic. They're an active listener. If you walk into your leader's office and you're trying to have a conversation and they're like, yeah, and they're just typing away, that's not active listening. So we could spend a whole session. That may be a future topic. We'll come back and talk about
Yeah.
active listening.
Yeah.
Humility, and then just commitment to personal and team growth. And I think personal growth is really important there. I have actually interacted with leaders, with companies who have said, I don't need to go to that. There's not anything else that I need to learn, or they have described their business as not being innovative. We're not innovative. I don't need to go learn new things. And I was like, whoa, hold on a minute, because we have to be innovative in today's world. And leaders, can a leader be successful and not have empathy, active listening, humility, commitment to personal and team growth? Sure. Yeah, there's probably some leaders who could be effective in that. Do I want to work for them? Absolutely not. Have I? Yeah, I probably have. I probably have worked with people who may not have had all those traits.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it's also important as a leader to do a self-check. Kind of, am I empathetic? Am I an active listener? Do I exhibit humility? And what does that look like? The reason I say that is, I was reading, also in the last 4 years, something that was in really the last year, something that became very top of mind for me as I am kind of diving into this service leadership and consulting space is learning, that personal growth. I read 27 books last year, and almost none of them were fictional. They were all like factual, guidance type books. And I was just absorbing as much as I could. And that whole, I have a degree in psychology, but I also minored in computer programming. I have this weird head, heart, brain that functions differently than some people's.
Yes.
And so I love looking at what is the psychological impact of an environment that has service leadership in place or different things. And I came across a really interesting stat. It's from the American Psychology Association. It was talking through recent surveys on workplace environments and psychological safety. And it said that while only 15% of workers say their workplace is toxic, 89% of those people said that their psychological safety at work is basically lower or non-existent than they need.
Wow.
And I thought, ooh, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about the traits in a successful leader, it's important to know how that impacts and the trickle down effect of all of that. Because if you have a leader who doesn't really exhibit those traits, there's a strong chance they may not recognize that there's 15% of their workforce that are so unhappy because they think it's a toxic work environment.
Yeah, I agree. Talina has a great question for us, and I am excited to hear what you have to say about this one. She asked, how can one be a good service leader in the remote world?
I love that. So actually, that can take me right into a next section. So when we talk about psychological safety, I think it's first important for us to kind of define what composes that. What is psychological safety in the work environment, and what are things to consider for that? So things to consider are relationships with coworkers, relationships with managers or supervisors, policies that are in place that promote equity, diversity, and inclusion, work schedules, how well workplaces prepare an individual for the future within that company, support for mental health and well-being that's provided by the employer, and opportunities for growth and development. So when we think about, those are the characteristics that typically identify job satisfaction. So then we can kind of take it into, okay, are those things existent in hybrid, remote, and on-site environments? And the answer is yes, they should be. We should have an opportunity to have relationships with all those people. We should understand, policies in place to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Work schedules, all those things. But what I find really interesting is in the hybrid or remote work environments, very often diversity, equity, and inclusion, that sometimes kind of goes out the window because it's like, well, we're all in meetings and you should be comfortable in your home. And, what am I going to do to include you? And then, how do we prepare someone? How do we replace the water cooler conversations? We were talking about that earlier. And I think you can create spaces. So some advice or offerings that I would say, if you have either a hybrid or even 100% remote work environment, make sure that you're creating space to develop those relationships. Are you having one-on-one conversations? And this is a fine line. I feel like working in recruiting and HR and having so much employment law over the years just pounded into our brains. There is, with the shift in the world, there is a little bit of a, kind of a coldness, a cold shoulder that can sometimes come from leaders or HR, because I think there's a concern of, well, I can't show too much compassion or empathy because what if I say the wrong thing? And in my position, I don't want that to be portrayed as, as I'm coming across too strong, coming on, then I'm gonna be sued for, something. And it's like, but how do we create those safe spaces for people to speak up and replace the water cooler conversations? I think that's a critical thing. And something that I saw really effective, I think, for that, as it was followed, as the newness wore off, it kind of trickled down in its impact. But something that I saw a group do was we created teams, and it was like hiking teams and board game teams. And so it was a place for teams to come together in a hybrid environment, a remote environment. And then as they had shared interests, they could go and kind of chat with people. There was a book club, so they could put in some book club chats, and it was non-work related discussions that could kind of replace those water cooler talks. So one offering for the hybrid world. And I would say just engaging and knowing your people. I think we can still be human and have those relationships with coworkers and leaders. And we can definitely promote learning and preparing them for the workplace in the future. Absolutely.
Very good. Very good. Okay, I want to add something, and then we have another question that I think is going to really kind of play into that. And so I had an interesting conversation about a month ago with a young man that is in a leadership position, and he is fully remote now. And I asked him, I just was curious about how he felt about all that. And he said his personality, and this is where I could see myself being this way too, but his personality is, okay, we've got this to get done. Let's go, 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 go. Come on. And he said one of the things that he feels like is missing is those water cooler moments, those facts that, hang on, I need to plug in. The fact that, and he's like, he's fine without the water cooler moments, but he does feel like sometimes he's running over his team in the process and not really taking the time to get to know them, because he's just kind of driven. He's like, okay, I got a job to get done and I want to get it done. And, I just need you to do your thing. And I don't necessarily want to build a relationship with you. So you've got this kind of weird situation. And if you were in the same location, you could kind of get a read on it that, hey, this person's not like real, and we're okay with him not being that way. But also too, when you're in that, like he told me, he goes, I know if I was in the same location with them, I would probably be a little bit more inclined to stop and have a conversation. Whereas now I'm like, I don't really care what you did last night, So
Yeah. So combating that. Yeah, I would say, that is a challenge. It's a challenge seen, kind of across the board. But, I would just encourage, two things, two replies on that. One, there is a recognition that person is treated differently. And so even in that small scenario, in few engagements, there is a recognition that person's being treated differently. And if other people observe that, that's where the toxicity begins, because, things that we tolerate become normal. And if we tolerate that behavior, then who's to say, the next person, perhaps your most engaged and, interactive person, is like, well, why am I putting in all this extra effort? I mean, they're getting paid more than me. They're not even engaged in the conversations, So you start getting into that space, and it's easy to get caught in that, and very quickly, because we do want to avoid conflict, but I think we cannot avoid conflict. I think that's the other piece of service leadership, is because you have those more engaging discussions with your team, the hope is that you're kind of aware if they're being frustrated, they're not engaging with the team. There's a reason for that. It could be something personal going on, or something outside of work. But I think it's always worth evaluating and learning, is there a reason why this person is responsive like that? Because at the end of the day, the other piece I think service leadership really talks to and includes is, are we hiring people that really exemplify and show our core values as a company? Yeah. And if we're not, that's a whole nother issue. But if we are hiring people who we believe fit our core values, then why is this person not engaging in discussions? There has to be a reason, and we need to learn why.
I think that could be a whole nother topic too. And I'm making a note because I have some ideas on that. No, and I want to get to this question because I think it's really good. I will say, in the example that I provided, what I think he's got going for him is he's very self-aware. And I think self-awareness is probably a really strong quality of a leader that is a service leader, is knowing that I do have this tendency, so I need to go and make sure that I do stop and engage and things like that. So I want to get to this question though. And I don't know who's asking this. Unfortunately, it says LinkedIn user, and I don't know why LinkedIn is not showing your name. I apologize. But this is such a great question. It says, what's a good approach to start teaching leadership skills for employees with little to no leadership skills whom you would like to promote into a management position?
So I would say in that position, first of all, yay for wanting to incorporate leadership training to those who do not have it, because I am a huge proponent of train the future. If we do not train the future, it's a problem. In fact, there's a Zig Ziglar quote. I have this list of like my favorite inspirational quotes, and Zig Ziglar says, the only thing worse than training employees and losing them is to not train them and keep them. And when you let that settle for just a minute, it's kind of like, oh yeah, like, because I used to hear that all the time in staffing. Well, we don't really have time to train this person, so we're just going to get someone in to fill the gap. Okay, well, if we don't take time to train someone, how do we encourage and create the future workforce that we want? We have to do so. So first of all, yay and congrats for wanting to train people. How do you do it? I think you have to really play into, I use a tool. I'm a huge fan of DISC profiles and personality profiling among teams. And that's something that I do as part of my, coaching assessment, is I can do these leadership, well, not just leadership, but team profiles. And it incorporates our natural tendencies and what our natural energizers and drainers are as a human. And then really, I think to have successful training, and especially leadership training, is recognizing that we're not all the same and that we do not all learn the same. Some people are visual learners. Some people are more of a textbook. They just want to read. Some people learn through observation. Some people need all of those things together for it to really sink in. I may be one of those. I love visuals. And I'm much more effective if you can show me one time, I've got it. But if I have to go dig for the information, sometimes, I'm a little bit ADD, and I'm probably a lot ADD, if some people would describe me that way. But when I kind of get into, if I have to go search for the information, then I find something else and I'm like, oh, well, what's that? And then, and then I'm down a rabbit hole. It's like, if you just provide the information to me, then I read it, boom, and I'm super effective. Mm-hmm. So I think being aware of that. The second thing is I would want to make sure that there is a conversation that the people in the training want to promote to leadership roles. And I think this is a huge, huge piece that is often overlooked. It is often assumed that someone who's really good in a role position, whether, be a recruiter or a salesperson or a programmer, insert role, someone who's really good at that role doesn't always necessarily want to be a leader of people. Mm-hmm. And I think that is probably the first thing that you need to evaluate and question before you even embark on training. And if you know that the person does, in fact, have interest in leading people, and sometimes there is a response, you can see the leadership qualities in them, but they're like, yeah, I don't know. I would really need training in that. Okay, well, that's a different situation. But if they don't have the personality, if they don't have the empathy, if they don't have those skills that we talked about, humility, and that desire to lead others and encourage personal growth and team growth, they may not be someone that you want in a leadership role. So I would evaluate first and then incorporate whatever their learning style is. If you have the capability, I would say, can you incorporate, cohorts or learning groups together, even if they're with a different organization. If you have a company partnership, maybe you put 3 of your leaders in training together through a certain program. Here locally in Arkansas, we have an amazing, I guess a shameless plug. I don't get paid for any of this, but Apprenticely is a wonderful program for that ongoing training. And if you don't have one of them in your state, then you need one. And if you don't have it, then message us. We can help you learn info. But Apprenticely is really a cool program for training like that.
So, our LinkedIn user has. The name is Christian Castro, and Christian asked, are there specific books or classes to start with that you recommend?
Yes. I personally, probably a personal preference, but that's, I guess, step one is finding what your style is. But personally, I love anything by Patrick Lencioni. I just love, his approach, the 5 behaviors of a dysfunctional team. To me, is a great leadership book because it kind of, in fact, I've got it right here. It's got this really cool hierarchy triangle that's in the book. And it talks about, so just kind of for everybody, it's got this cool triangle. And what it talks about is that a team has to have trust, which leads to, if they don't have absence of trust, leads to fear of conflict, which leads to lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. And I'm a certified facilitator of that program. The reason I bring that up is because as a leader, you're typically leading a team. So starting with books that help you identify what makes a good team are a place that I encourage people to start. And then once you know what a good team is, okay, well, then what are the places and procedures and steps that we can function and take on to help build that team and what that successful team looks like. I think the Traction book, from a leadership approach, I'm very familiar with the EOS model, which is entrepreneurial operating system. It's always a tongue tire, but that's based off of a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And there's a ton of them. Yeah.
Let me stop you real quick. 5 behaviors of dysfunctional leadership. Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm gonna put that in the chat.
Yeah, this is
for me to say.
Yeah,
and it's by
Patrick Lencioni, Lencioni, and I can. Yeah, and I can message you with the link of some books recommendations to post to the listeners. But yeah,
sorry about the dog.
You're totally fine. It means we're in real life, right? When we hear the dogs. But that's where I would start. And then I would also encourage getting involved with local trainings. I think I do believe that leadership training really needs in-person and hybrid. I think we can learn a lot over the phone, but personally, the best leadership training that I received was from people. It was from my original mentors in the staff and recruiting business. And, something that I used to always also incorporate with my team was I would always tell them, even as a regional director working with different people on the team, they were like, you spend so much time training us these things, and we're really appreciative of that. And it's only recently that they've shared these things with me and said that I had been one of their very influential leaders. And I was like, that wowed me because all I did was I was like, hey, you want to know how to do the spreadsheet? Come here, let's do it. Let me show you how to do some of these reports. And my mindset on that was, as a leader, you have to always consider who is going to replace you when you grow. And if you cannot answer that question, and I would encourage that you should have 2 people that can replace you as you grow, how are you going to grow? If you cannot grow in your organization because there's no one to backfill you, then it is critical that you begin to train people. And if you can't train someone, then the recognition becomes, are you going to have to leave the company, or do you go speak to your leadership about how do you get someone to train in the wings?
Yeah. You mentioned another book named called Traction. Who is the author of that?
That one is by Gino Wickman, Gino. Last name is Wickham. And there's a whole series that go with the traction book. It's more of a structure. One of the things that I like to focus on in leadership is accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Without accountability, then I think basically nothing else will work or exist. If we
Mm-hmm.
can't depend on our peers, depend on our team, then it ends up putting all the stress on you as an individual, and that leads to burnout. And that leads to those toxicities and psychological safety issues and all of those things that come with it.
What do you feel like are some of the common challenges that are faced by service leadership or leaders, and how can leaders effectively overcome obstacles and inspire their teams?
Sure. I think common obstacles or challenges, very often it's balancing the organizational goals. We talked about this earlier,
Mhm.
balancing organizational goals with the individual needs,
Mhm.
maintaining high levels of engagement and dealing with resistance to change. I mean, that's pretty much any company, but also service leaders. And I think to overcome a lot of that, it requires transparent communication. The EOS model actually, that's one of the huge components of that, is it requires kind of this ongoing, consistent, documented communication. But also, I think to overcome, you have to regularly solicit feedback, involve team members in making decisions. If they're voluntold to do something, then it's less likely that they'll feel engaged to do it. But if
Mhm.
it's partly their idea because you help them get there, it may take a little bit longer, but the buy-in is so important to execution.
Right.
If they buy into the idea and know that they have a successful chance of making it successful, your chances of involvement are going to improve.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I think just being genuine, this is another thing that a former team member called me out on, and it stuck with me for a lot of years, because it's like, oh, wow, I hadn't really considered that side of it. But as leaders, and I think specifically in service leadership, something I was faulted with was I kind of had this stoic personality. And it was like everything was great, and we can do this. We're, being positive. We're going to get through all these things. And for some people, they need to see that softer side. They need to see the human aspect.
Mhm.
They need to see this person is also struggling. This person is a little bit concerned. We may not actually achieve this task.
Yeah.
And expressing some of that fear, because what was shared with me was they didn't feel that they could express some of those emotions because they thought it would make them seem inferior or incapable. And
Yeah. So good.
that was really why eye-opening for me, because in my mind I was being positive and encouraging so that I could build them up. But
Uh-huh.
sometimes we need to feel the emotion. Another thing is, over the last 2 years I started yoga teacher training because frankly the impact on myself as a leader, I had become just in a position where it's like about 4 years ago, it's like everything just annoyed me and burned me out, and got me to a place of total burnout. And recognizing how to de-stress myself
Mm.
became a huge part of ongoing. So I would say another critical thing that I think service leaders face, that we haven't really talked about, is their own personal well-being. Because as a
Mhm.
service leader and an empathetic person, you're hearing often all of the issues and problems and reasons that
Mhm.
things move forward, whether it's personal or work related. And if you don't have a good outlet to release those things, then it's going to impact you as a leader, and you will not become a service leader. You will become the tyrant that no one wants to be around. And so,
I can relate to that. I mean, it gets heavy, and it gets heavy, and you just kind of want to go leave your problems at home. I don't want to deal with them here. And yet, like we
mhm,
talked about already, you spend most of your time at work, so you
yep,
know that's part of their life. And if they're going something through something hard or a challenge, that can be really, really hard. You know, I guess one of the questions I would like to ask on that same note is, how do you know when it's time to cut ties with someone? Maybe you have bent over backwards and trying to build them up, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier on that Zig Ziglar quote, about keeping people around, and yet you are empathetic, and you want to be positive, and you want to see, you're like, oh, they're just going through some stuff, and yeah, when do you just say enough is enough?
For me, I think that's that significant shift in perspective and approach is, and why I love Dysfunctions of a Team, because the foundation of everything in that program is accountability. If I cannot, and so to combat that, I would say, for me, recognizing burnout, I guess two sides to that. Recognizing in myself that I was burned out and I was over it, I was angrier often. I mean, it was just like all the time. I was just like, my response was so snippy. And it was very, and I'm still decompressing, I mean, just full transparency as a leader, it's like, I'm still decompressing from over 20, almost 20 years in the industry. It's heavy. You terminate people, you hear why they aren't working, you hear why they need a job, you hear all of these things that come into the HR space specifically, in leadership space specifically, because you're kind of a counselor too, to the humans in your team. And so awareness of those things, but also awareness to let go of them. They are not your burdens to carry. And so accountability becomes very, very critical for success in the service leadership model, because you as a human cannot be responsible for every single thing that happens. That's going back to that environment. It takes a village. It takes a village to be successful. And I think service leaders who begin to make that shift to they're the leader and you come to me for all the answers and no one else has the answers, everything comes through me, that becomes a bottleneck and it is not sustainable. Because either they're going to burn out or the rest of the team is going to get frustrated.
Yeah. It's really hard when you watch the rest of the team go, why are you not doing something? And especially, when you've got a high performer that is the one that's the issue and those kinds of things. So yeah, it's I think accountability, and that's something, you almost like, oh, I don't want to enforce these kinds of things. But, I read a really great scripture in Proverbs this morning that was something to the effect of, disciplining your child or lead, or be an active participant in their death. And, it's people really do thrive in a situation where not micromanage controlling discipline, but where there is discipline and accountability and clear expectations, so that like, here I can go to this point, but if I cross over here, that's a no-go. And so yeah, I just think that was always a challenging one for me as well. So I just kind of feel like, oh, everybody should, be self-accountable and all of that good stuff. So
yes, sorry. And I've also got the barking dog, but she's holding somebody accountable, saying they're supposed to open the door for me when I bark.
Yeah, right. That was mine earlier.
The other piece, so sorry. But the other piece I would add on that is sorry. It had to use my mama voice. But I think knowing what the measurables are to create a space of accountability and it being effective. I think one of the things that I would call out in service leadership, there is a collaboration effort, and there's very often meetings of minds that take place to ensure success of moving something forward, whether it's project planning, project, whatever, moving the needle forward. But I think the other piece that we have to be mindful of is the meetings. The meeting structure sometimes becomes so overwhelming, and I would encourage teams only allow recurring meetings to be scheduled for a 90-day block, and reevaluate every 90 days. Is this meeting effective? Is it delivering the outcomes that we need? And I think if you have accountability in place throughout your organization, then it's not it takes out the emotion of service leadership. Because while we are empathetic and we are mindful of human things, at the end of the day, as a business leader, business owner, you have a business and everyone has a role. And if you are the cook and you've agreed to be the cook and you've been trained to be the cook and you refuse to cook, that's a problem. And it's like, we can accommodate, I'm not really feeling it today, or the market didn't have the ingredients that I need.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how do we get through that? Let's prepare for that. And maybe we go to a different store. Maybe we leave earlier so we have more time to go to the store, to a different store. So again, holding that accountability is huge. And I think that takes the emotional aspect out of it, because at the end of the day, there's still a business to run. And if we depend on, I always say that when we're hiring, we often go through this process of, we're going to find the absolute best talent possible that we can afford, that will achieve the outcomes that we need in a role. If we don't allow that person to do their thing, then it's still me and my limited knowledge of that role. I'm not, I'm not all of the roles in my company. There's no way you can be, because again, service leadership is that collaboration and using the skills, the strengths of everyone, but also being aware of what the weaknesses are and not piling the individual who, if their weakness is detailed management, you said it earlier, right person, right seat. That is a key component of the EOS model. And evaluating, if someone is not successful and they consistently miss accountability targets for entering data or whatever it is, okay, well, maybe they're the right person. They're humble and they have all the things that your core values say we need as a human, but they're not in the right position. So you have another position to put them in. And if not, then that's the most unfortunate situation, when you have a really good engaged person, but they simply don't have the skill set for an open role. And so that becomes a conversation of, is there training available? Can you train them to be the thing that they need to be? And if not, helping them, I would encourage, that's a discussion that should happen between the leader and that person. And maybe it's a 6-month transition plan, but at some point that person is going to need a transition out of your organization. And if you can help them do that successfully, how about that for service leadership? If you recognize someone's not good with your team, but you help them find something they can be successful in, is, to me, the ultimate service leader.
Right. Well, Amy, this has been so good, and we have gone way longer than I expected, but I had some great questions, and I just appreciate so much your time. I mean, maybe next time we need to break things down a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. We could stay on this for probably 5 weeks.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And I hope that you found this helpful. Would love to know what your biggest takeaways are. If you want to drop that in the comments. And again, if you're catching this on the replay, use #replay. And thank you so much for staying with us all the way to the end. I will be back next week for a solo episode. So I'm excited. I have a great topic for you for next week, and plan to see you then. And just as a reminder, I do provide resume services and job search strategies for mid, senior, and executive level professionals. So you can definitely schedule a consultation with me here at this address on the screen if that is something that you need help with. And if not, I will plan to see everybody here again next week at 12:30. And until then, bye for now.